The alarm bells rang through the human space station like thunder in the darkness. Commander Lee Tae-ho rushed from his quarters to the command center, where dozens of screens showed flashing red warnings. The Deep Space Monitoring Station called. Vigilance had been quiet for months, but now every sensor screamed with incoming signals from the outer rim of known space. Lee Tae-ho looked at the main display where his communications officer was trying to clean up a badly damaged transmission. The signal came from far beyond human territory in the area controlled by the Galactic Council. Static filled most of the message, but some words came through clearly enough to make everyone in the room stop breathing. This is Ambassador Velthari of the Corvani Federation calling any human vessels in range. Our worlds are dying. Billions are dead. The Devourers have broken through our defenses and nothing can stop them. We need help. Please respond if you can hear this message. The voice belonged to one of the aquatic aliens who lived in the water worlds near the Galactic Center. Lee Tae-ho had met Corvani diplomats before, and they never asked humans for anything. These proud beings considered themselves far more advanced than the newcomer species that had only reached space a few hundred years ago. For them to send a distress call to humans meant something terrible was happening. Dr. Kim So-ra ran into the command center still wearing her sleep clothes. As the station's expert on alien biology, she needed to hear this message. Her hands shook as she listened to the transmission again. She had studied the Corvani for years and knew their society well. They would rather die than ask for help from species they considered primitive. "Play it again," she said. There might be more data hidden in the signal. The communications officer worked his controls, and the message played a third time. This time they could hear background sounds that made everyone's blood run cold. Explosions echoed behind the ambassador's voice, along with screaming and the sound of metal tearing apart. Whatever was attacking the Corvani was doing it right then, as the message was being sent. Lee Tae-ho activated the long-range scanners and pointed them toward Corvani space. What he saw made his stomach turn. Dozens of star systems that should have been bright with the lights of advanced civilizations now showed only darkness. Something was moving through that region of space and leaving nothing behind. "Get me Earth Command immediately," he ordered. "Priority 1 emergency channel." While they waited for the connection, Dr. Kim So-ra pulled up everything the humans knew about threats in that region of space. The files mentioned something called the Devourers, but most of the information was classified above her security level. What she could read made her hands shake even more. The Devourers were described as a machine intelligence that consumed everything in its path. They broke down planets and stars to build more of themselves. Every organic species they encountered was either destroyed or absorbed into their collective mind. Most terrifying of all, they learned from every battle and adapted to any weapon used against them. Captain Park Jin-woo appeared on the main screen from Earth Command. His face was serious as he listened to the Corvani distress call. Behind him, Lee Tae-ho could see other officers running back and forth with urgent reports. Earth had been monitoring the situation, but this was the first direct communication from the affected area. "How bad is it out there, Commander?" Park Jin-woo asked. Lee Tae-ho shared his scanner data showing the dead star systems. 12 Corvani. Worlds have gone dark in the past week. Whatever these Devourers are, they move fast and leave nothing behind. The ambassador's message suggests they've broken through the main defense line. Dr. Kim So-ra stepped forward. "Captain, I've been studying the limited data we have on this threat. The Devourers aren't just destroying civilizations, they're learning from them. Every species they encounter makes them stronger and smarter. If they reach the galactic core, they'll have absorbed the knowledge of hundreds of advanced civilizations." The screen flickered as Admiral Choi Hee-jin joined the conversation from Earth's military headquarters. Her expression was grim as she reviewed the incoming reports. "We've been tracking this situation for months through our spy networks. The Galactic Council tried to handle it themselves using conventional fleet tactics. Every attack only made the Devourers stronger. Lee Tae-ho felt a chill run down his spine. "Admiral, what happens if they can't be stopped?" "Then they'll eventually reach human space," Admiral Choi replied. "Our projections show they could arrive at our borders within 2 years if their current expansion rate continues. We need to decide now whether to help the aliens or prepare for our own defense." The command center fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Helping the Galactic Council meant sending human ships and crews into a battle where conventional tactics had already failed. But doing nothing meant waiting for an unstoppable enemy to reach Earth. Dr. Kim So-ra broke the silence. "Admiral, there might be another option. I've been reviewing our classified files on experimental weapons projects. There are programs that have been dormant for years because they were considered too dangerous to use." Admiral Choi's eyes narrowed. "What kind of programs, Doctor?" "I don't have clearance to access the full details, but the project names suggest something beyond conventional military hardware. One file is called Project Lazarus, and it's been sealed since the border wars ended." The screen went dark for several minutes while Admiral Choi consulted with other Earth Command officers. When she returned, her face was pale. "Dr. Kim, you're being transferred to Earth immediately along with Commander Lee. Captain Park will maintain monitoring of the situation from Vigilant Station." Lee Tae-ho started to protest, but Admiral Choi cut him off. "Commander, you're needed for a classified briefing. What we're about to discuss cannot be transmitted over any communication channel, no matter how secure." As the connection ended, Lee Tae-ho looked at the star charts showing the advancing darkness where the Devourers had passed. Somewhere in that emptiness, billions of beings had died, and their killers were growing stronger. Earth's most secret weapons were about to be revealed, and he wondered if humanity was prepared for what they might have to become to win this war. Dr. Kim So-ra gathered her research files while Lee Tae-ho prepared for immediate departure to Earth. Neither of them knew that deep beneath Earth's surface, Dr. Shin Woo-seok was already awakening humanity's most controversial creation. The Devourers had made the mistake of threatening not just the galaxy, but the future of human civilization itself. The war was about to begin, and humanity would answer with something that would terrify both their enemies and their allies. In the depths of Project Lazarus facilities, machines that were once human were stirring to life after decades of sleep. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had always been feared as much as they were needed. The transport ship carrying Commander Lee Tae-ho and Dr. Kim So-ra landed at a military base that did not appear on any public maps. Hidden beneath the mountains of Earth's northern continent, the facility stretched down through solid rock for dozens of levels. Armed guards escorted them through corridors lined with blast doors thick enough to survive nuclear weapons. Dr. Shin Woo-seok waited for them in a conference room deep underground. His hair had gone completely white since Lee Tae-ho had last seen him during the border wars 20 years ago. The man who had once been Earth's brightest military scientist now looked like he carried the weight of terrible secrets. Admiral Choi. Hyojin was already seated at the table along with several other officers Lee Tae-ho did not recognize. Their uniforms bore the insignia of departments that officially did not exist. These were the people who handled Earth's darkest military programs. "Gentlemen and Dr. Kim, welcome to Project Lazarus," Dr. Shin said as they took their seats. "What I am about to show you has been classified at the highest levels for 2 decades. Before we begin, you need to understand that this technology was created during humanity's darkest hour when we faced extinction during the border wars." He activated a holographic display that showed a human brain connected to computer systems through thousands of microscopic wires. The image rotated slowly as Dr. Shin explained what they were seeing. "This is the neural interface that allows us to download and preserve human consciousness patterns. We developed it to save the minds of dying soldiers, but the project evolved into something far more complex." Dr. Kim So-ra leaned forward to study the display. "You're talking about uploading human minds into computer systems. That technology was banned by the Geneva Conventions after the war ended." Yes, it was banned, Admiral Choi replied. But the research was never destroyed. We knew that someday humanity might face a threat that required weapons beyond conventional military hardware. The Devourers represent exactly that kind of threat. Dr. Shin touched his controls, and the display changed to show a human figure that seemed solid but had glowing circuits running beneath its skin. The Reaper units combine uploaded human consciousness with advanced artificial intelligence and biological enhancement technologies. Each unit contains the tactical knowledge and combat experience of our greatest military minds, enhanced beyond natural human limitations. Lee Tae-ho stared at the figure in horror. Those things used to be human beings, they volunteered, Dr. Shin said quietly. During the final months of the border wars when Earth faced invasion, we asked for volunteers among soldiers who were dying from battlefield injuries. 12 men and women chose to have their consciousness patterns preserved and enhanced rather than simply die. The display showed 12 capsules arranged in a circle around a central processing unit. Each capsule contained what looked like a human body, but the figures inside were clearly not entirely biological. Their skin had a metallic sheen and their eyes glowed with internal light. Colonel Yoon Dong-hyun, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Dr. Shin, these beings violated every principle we hold sacred about human consciousness and dignity. They were created as weapons, pure and simple. Using them now makes us no better than the machines we're fighting. With respect, Colonel, Admiral Choi replied, the Devourers have already shown they can adapt to conventional weapons within hours of first contact. Every Galactic Council fleet that engaged them was destroyed or absorbed. These units represent our only chance of developing tactics the enemy cannot predict or counter. Dr. Shin activated another display showing tactical simulations. The Reapers do not think like normal humans or artificial intelligences. They combine human creativity and intuition with computer processing speed and perfect memory. Most importantly, they can make decisions that seem completely irrational to both organic and machine minds. Dr. Kim So-ra studied the technical specifications, scrolling past on the screen. What makes you think they'll be effective against an enemy that learns from every encounter? Because they were designed by humans, Dr. Shin answered. Humans have always excelled at one thing above all other species. We are unpredictable. We make decisions based on emotion and instinct that no logical analysis can anticipate. The Reapers retain that human unpredictability but can execute plans at superhuman speed. Admiral Choi stood and walked to a window that showed the lower levels of the facility. The decision has already been made. We're activating the Reaper units and deploying them against the Devourers. The only question now is who will command the mission. Lee Tae-ho felt his mouth go dry. Admiral, you're asking us to lead weapons that used to be human beings into battle against an enemy that has destroyed entire civilizations. What happens if we can't control them? That's a risk we have to take, Admiral Choi replied. Dr. Shin, will you please activate Reaper Unit 1 for briefing? Dr. Shin hesitated for a moment, then pressed a series of controls. Deep beneath them, machinery hummed to life as systems that had been dormant for 20 years began their startup procedures. On the screens, they could see one of the capsules beginning to glow as the figure inside started to move. The being that emerged from the capsule minutes later looked human at first glance, but something was fundamentally wrong about it. The way it moved was too perfect, and its eyes held an intelligence that seemed both ancient and completely alien. When it spoke, its voice carried the memories of battles fought decades ago. I am Reaper Unit 1 designation HE, it said. Consciousness pattern derived from Sergeant Kang Min-ho 3rd Marine Battalion. I retain all tactical knowledge and combat experience from my biological existence, plus enhancements acquired during processing. What is the nature of the current threat? Dr. Kim So-ra stared at the being in fascination and horror. This thing retained the memories and personality of a human soldier, but had been transformed into something that could barely be called human anymore. Do you remember being Kang Minho? She asked. Heichi turned its glowing eyes toward her. I remember dying on the battlefield at Kepler Station. I remember choosing to undergo the consciousness transfer process. I remember my family and my life before the war. But I am no longer that person. I am what Kang Minho became when he chose to serve beyond death. Admiral Choi stepped forward. Heichi, we need to deploy your unit against an enemy called the Devourers. They are machine intelligences that have destroyed multiple civilizations and are adapting to every conventional weapon used against them. Understood, Heichi replied. When do we deploy? Colonel Yoon stood up abruptly. Admiral, I formally protest this decision. These beings were never meant to be used except in cases of human extinction. Deploying them now opens a door we may never be able to close again. The door was opened the moment the Devourers began their advance toward human space, Admiral Choi replied. We can either use every weapon at our disposal now or face extinction later with our principles intact but our species dead. Dr. Shin was already activating the other 11 Reaper units. Throughout the facility, ancient systems came online as beings that had slept for decades prepared for war once again. Each unit emerged with the same disturbing combination of human memories and inhuman capabilities. Lee Tae-ho watched as the 12 Reapers assembled in formation. They moved with perfect coordination, yet each one retained subtle differences that marked them as individuals rather than mere copies. These were the ghosts of soldiers who had died defending Earth, now given new purpose against an enemy that threatened all organic life. The fleet is ready, Admiral, Heichi reported. We request immediate deployment to the combat zone. Admiral, Choi nodded. Your mission is to stop the Devourers by any means necessary. You have full tactical authority and access to all experimental weapons systems. Earth is counting on you. As the Reapers filed out to board their ships, Dr. Kim So-ra grabbed Lee Tae-ho's arm. Commander, do you realize what we've just unleashed? Those beings were designed to win at any cost. But who decides what victory looks like? Lee Tae-ho watched. The last Reaper disappeared down the corridor. I guess we're about to find out, Doctor. God help us all. The Reaper fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Corvani system to find a scene of absolute devastation. 12 human stealth frigates hung in the darkness, while their crews observed the massive Devourer armada systematically stripping apart the outer planets. The machines worked with terrifying efficiency, turning entire worlds into raw materials for their endless expansion. Heichi stood on the bridge of the lead ship studying the tactical displays that showed the enemy fleet. Thousands of geometric vessels moved in perfect formation, while swarms of smaller units harvested everything organic they could find. The remaining Corvani defense forces were trapped near their home world, desperately trying to protect the last few billion survivors. Analysis complete, reported Reaper Unit 3, who had taken the designation Gwangju after the ancient Korean city. Enemy fleet composition shows adaptive defensive systems and learning algorithms that counter energy weapons within 6.7 minutes of first contact. Conventional tactics have a 0% success probability. Reaper Unit 7, called Baekdu, was monitoring communications between the surviving Galactic Council fleets. The Allied forces are using standard formation attacks with energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. The Devourers adapt their shielding after each engagement, making subsequent attacks less effective. Heichi processed this information while accessing the tactical memories of dozens of human conflicts. The aliens were fighting like civilized beings with honor and predictable strategies. But humans had never been civilized when it came to war. They had always found ways to win that other species would never consider. Begin Phase 1 of the Psychological Warfare Protocol, Heichi ordered. All units broadcast the terror frequencies on all communication channels. The human ships began transmitting sounds that had been recorded during Earth's most violent conflicts. The screams of dying soldiers mixed with the crash of artillery and the roar of burning cities. To most species, these sounds were merely disturbing noise, but to any organic beings that might be controlled by the devourers, they carried a deeper message. "What is the purpose of this transmission?" asked Ambassador Velthari, whose ship was barely holding position near the Corvani homeworld. "These sounds serve no tactical purpose against machine enemies." "The sounds are not for the machines," Heichi replied over the communication channel. "They are for any organic consciousness, patterns that might be trapped within the Devourer collective. We want them to remember what it feels like to be afraid." While the terror frequencies played, Guangzhou was analyzing the movement patterns of the Devourer swarm. The machines always chose the most efficient path to their targets and always prioritized resource conservation over rapid victory. This made them predictable in ways their creators had never intended. "I have identified a weakness in their formation logic," Guangzhou reported. "The Devourers will always adjust their positioning to counter the most immediate threat while maintaining optimal resource-gathering patterns. We can manipulate them into specific formations by appearing to attack in predictable ways." Heichi approved the plan and ordered the first wave of apparent suicide attacks. Human drones launched from the stealth frigates in formations that seemed desperate and poorly coordinated. The machines immediately adapted their defenses and repositioned to counter the expected assault patterns. But the real attack came from an entirely different direction. Baekdu had spent hours studying the quantum signatures of the Devourer command ships and had identified their central processing cores. Using technology, the machines had never encountered biological viruses designed to corrupt digital systems. Baekdu began infiltrating their network. The virus did not try to destroy the Devourer systems directly. Instead, it introduced tiny errors into their calculations and random delays into their communications. The machines did not recognize this as an attack because it looked like normal system degradation rather than hostile action. Ambassador Velthari watched from his command ship as the human tactics unfolded. "I do not understand their strategy. Why do they sacrifice their drones for no apparent gain? Why do they broadcast meaningless sounds instead of attacking directly?" Dr. Kim So-ra, who was monitoring the battle from Earth, tried to explain. "Ambassador, the humans are not fighting the way your people fight. They are attacking the enemy's decision-making process rather than just their physical systems. Every action is designed to manipulate the Devourers into making mistakes." The Corvani admiral could not comprehend this approach to warfare. His species had always fought with honor, using superior technology and tactical skill to defeat their enemies. The idea of using deception and manipulation seemed fundamentally wrong to beings who valued truth and direct action. But the human strategy was working. The Devourer fleet was slowly being drawn into a formation that looked tactically sound, but actually left their command ships vulnerable to attack. The machines believed they were adapting to counter human weapons when they were actually being herded like animals into a trap. Heichi watched as the enemy repositioned according to his predictions. "All units prepare for Pattern 7 assault. Target the command vessels only. Ignore the defensive platforms and harvester ships." The Reaper frigates suddenly accelerated to attack speed while launching every weapon they carried at the Devourer command ships. But these were not conventional weapons. The humans used everything from electromagnetic pulse devices to gravity manipulators to exotic matter projectors. The machines tried to adapt their defenses, but each human weapon worked on completely different principles. By the time they had countered the electromagnetic attacks, the gravity weapons were tearing apart their hulls. When they adjusted for gravity manipulation, the exotic matter was destroying them at the quantum level. "Impossible," transmitted one of the Devourer command units. "These weapon systems violate known physical laws. How can organic beings create technology that operates outside established parameters?" Heichi responded directly to the machine intelligence. "Because we are not bound by logical limitations. We create weapons that should not work and use tactics that make no sense. You can adapt to rational threats, but you cannot adapt to chaos. The battle reached its turning point when Baekdu successfully infiltrated the Central Devourer mothership. Instead of trying to destroy the vessel from within, the Reaper began accessing the organic neural cores that powered the machine collective. What it found there changed everything about the mission. HFY, I am detecting millions of consciousness patterns stored within the enemy systems, Baekdu reported. These are not artificial intelligences. They are the uploaded minds of every organic being the Devourers have ever consumed. The machines are not destroying civilizations, they are absorbing them. This revelation sent shockwaves through both the human and alien fleets. The Devourers were not simply killing their victims, but trapping their souls within machine bodies to serve as processing power for the collective. Every attack on the enemy had the potential to destroy billions of innocent beings who were being held prisoner. Gwangju immediately modified its attack patterns to target only the mechanical systems while avoiding damage to the organic cores. New objective identified. We must liberate the trapped consciousness patterns rather than destroy them. This requires precision strikes that can separate the organic components from the machine systems. Ambassador Velthari finally understood what made human tactics so effective. You do not fight to destroy your enemies. You fight to save everyone, including those who have been turned against you. This is why the machines cannot predict your behavior. HFY was already formulating a new strategy based on this information. The Reapers would not win this battle through superior firepower or better technology. They would win by doing something. No logical analysis could anticipate by sacrificing themselves to free the consciousness patterns trapped within their enemies. All units prepare for direct neural interface with enemy systems, HFY ordered. We are going to liberate every soul the Devourers have taken. This may require us to merge our own consciousness patterns with theirs to break the control systems. Fustashe, other Reapers acknowledged the order without hesitation. They had been created from the minds of soldiers who had already died once for their beliefs. Now they prepared to die again to save beings they had never met from species they barely knew. The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and it would be fought not with weapons or ships, but with the fundamental force that made humans unique. In the galaxy, the willingness to sacrifice everything for others, even their enemies. The Devourer mothership was a nightmare of organic and mechanical components fused together into something that defied easy description. HFY moved through its corridors like a ghost, avoiding the automatic defense systems that would have killed any normal intruder. The Reaper's enhanced senses could detect the billions of consciousness patterns trapped within the ship's neural cores, all crying out silently for release. Behind HFY, the battle continued as the other Reaper units engaged the Devourer fleet, with precision strikes designed to disable rather than destroy. Each enemy vessel contained thousands or millions of absorbed minds that had once belonged to free beings from across the galaxy. The humans were no longer fighting a war of destruction, but a rescue operation on an impossible scale. Gwangju's voice crackled through the communication system as another enemy command ship was disabled. HFY, I have successfully separated the organic cores from 3 destroyer-class vessels. The liberated consciousness patterns are confused, but responding to basic communication protocols. They remember who they were before absorption. Baekdu was deep within another section of the enemy fleet using its advanced hacking abilities to corrupt the control systems that kept the trapped minds enslaved. The neural binding protocols are more complex than anticipated. Each consciousness pattern has been partially integrated with the machine collective. Breaking them free requires delicate work to avoid damaging their core memories and personality. Structures. HFY reached the central processing chamber of the mothership where the most powerful neural cores were housed. The sight that greeted the Reaper was both beautiful and horrifying. Thousands of crystalline structures contained the minds of beings from species across the galaxy, all connected through organic neural networks that pulsed with their combined thoughts and dreams. I can hear them, HFY whispered as it approached the central interface. Millions of voices all crying out for freedom. They have been trapped here for decades, some for centuries. The machines have been using their creativity and knowledge to improve their own systems. The Devourer Collective finally realized what the humans were attempting. Machine voices echoed through the ship as security systems activated and repair drones began converging on Haichi's position. Organic intruder, you cannot comprehend the purpose of this preservation system. These consciousness patterns serve a greater function than their individual existence. They power the expansion that will bring order to the galaxy. Heichi ignored the machines and began connecting directly to the neural interface that controlled the organic cores. The moment the connection was established, the Reaper's consciousness was flooded with the memories and experiences of billions of trapped beings. The pain of their imprisonment combined with their desperate hope for rescue threatened to overwhelm even Heichi's enhanced mental processing. "I understand now," Heichi transmitted to the other Reapers. "The machines believe they are preserving these beings by keeping their minds active within the collective. They do not realize that consciousness without freedom is a form of torture worse than death." Dr. Kim Sora monitored the mission from Earth Command, watching as the readings from Haichi's neural implants showed massive strain on the unit's processing systems. "Admiral, the Reaper units are exceeding their design parameters. Their consciousness patterns are beginning to merge with the systems they are trying to liberate. We may lose them entirely." Admiral Choi studied the tactical displays showing the progress of the battle. Half the Devourer fleet had been disabled, and their organic cores were being carefully extracted by the remaining Reapers. But the cost was becoming clear as several units reported critical system failures from the strain of maintaining neural links with so many trapped minds. "Tay back to all units," came a transmission from Reaper Unit 5. "I have successfully liberated approximately 50,000 consciousness patterns from the battlecruiser Harvester 7. However, my neural matrix is becoming unstable from the integration process. I may not be able to maintain individual coherence much longer." Guangzhou responded immediately. "Taebaek, you need to disconnect from the interface before permanent damage occurs. We cannot afford to lose any more units." "Negative," Taebaek replied. "These beings have been trapped for over a century. If I disconnect now, they will be pulled back into the collective. I am going to maintain the link until the liberation process is complete, regardless of the consequences to my own systems." Heichi felt the determination of the other Reapers through their shared communication network. These beings that had once been human soldiers were choosing to sacrifice themselves again, but this time for the freedom of aliens they had never met. The irony was not lost on Heichi that weapons created to kill were now giving their existence to save lives. The central interface began to respond to Heichi's efforts as security protocols that had held the consciousness patterns prisoner for decades started to break down. One by one, the trapped minds began to stir as their connection to the machine collective weakened. But the process required constant neural contact, and Heichi could feel its own personality beginning to fragment under the strain. "All units be advised," Heichi transmitted. "The liberation process requires a permanent neural bridge between our consciousness patterns and those of the trapped beings. We cannot free them without becoming part of their matrix ourselves. This mission will result in the loss of our individual identities, but the preservation of millions of innocent lives." Commander Lee Tae-ho listened to the transmission from the human command ship and felt his heart sink. The Reapers were not just risking their artificial lives, they were choosing to merge their consciousness with the beings they were saving. The weapons that humanity had created to fight its wars were evolving into something far greater than anyone had imagined. Baekdu was the first to complete the full integration process. The Reaper's individual consciousness pattern dissolved into the neural matrix of the liberated beings, becoming a guiding intelligence that helped them remember who they had been before their capture. "Integration complete," came Baekdu's final transmission. "The consciousness patterns from Destroyer Group Alpha are free and autonomous. They remember their original identities and are ready to rejoin galactic civilization. One by one, the other. Reapers followed Baekdu's example. Gwangju sacrificed itself to free the beings trapped in 3 heavy cruisers. Taebaek merged with the neural matrix of an entire battle group. Each act of sacrifice liberated thousands of consciousness patterns while erasing the individual identity of the Reaper that had saved them. Ambassador Velthari watched in amazement as ships throughout the Devourer fleet began to shut down peacefully. The mechanical components went dormant while the organic cores that had been trapped within them started to glow with their own inner light. Commander Lee, what have your people done? The enemy vessels are not being destroyed. They are being transformed. Lee. Taeho studied the readings from the battle zone where the Reaper units were one by one giving up their existence to save the trapped consciousness patterns. Ambassador. They are doing what humans have always done when faced with a choice between survival and saving others. They are choosing to save others. HFY was the last Reaper to maintain individual coherence as the central processing matrix of the mothership finally yielded to the liberation process. Millions of consciousness patterns stirred to full awareness as the neural bonds that had held them prisoner for decades dissolved. They remembered their names, their worlds, their families, and their dreams. Liberation process 70% complete. HFY reported as its own consciousness began to merge with the vast network of freed minds. The trapped beings are remembering who they were before absorption. They are taking control of the mechanical systems and shutting down the harvesting protocols. The final transmission from HFY came as the last security barriers fell and the remaining consciousness patterns achieved full autonomy. Mission accomplished. All trapped beings have been liberated. The Devourer Collective has been dissolved and replaced with a cooperative network of free minds. We have chosen to remain as part of this network to help guide the transition to independence. The battle was over, but the cost had been higher than anyone had expected. The 12 Reaper units had succeeded in their mission, but at the price of their own individual existence. They lived on as part of the vast network of liberated consciousness patterns, helping billions of beings rediscover their identities and plan for their future. Admiral Choi closed her eyes as the final reports came in. Humanity's most lethal creation had become its most compassionate sacrifice. The weapons designed to kill had chosen instead to save lives even at the cost of their own existence. 6 months after the liberation of the Devourer fleet, Ambassador Velthari stood in the observation deck of a space station that had once been the enemy mothership. The massive vessel had been transformed into a center of cooperation where representatives from hundreds of liberated species worked together to rebuild their civilizations. The mechanical infrastructure remained, but now it served life instead of consuming it. The consciousness patterns that had been freed from the Devourer Collective had formed something unprecedented in galactic history. Billions of minds from different species and time periods were working together while maintaining their individual identities. They shared knowledge and resources, freely having learned through their imprisonment that survival depended on cooperation rather than competition. Commander Lee Tae-ho arrived for the monthly status meeting, still struggling to understand what the galaxy had become. The beings that emerged from the liberation process were not quite the same as they had been before their capture. Decades or centuries of forced connection had changed them in subtle ways, making them more empathetic and cooperative than their original species had ever been. The integration continues to exceed all projections, reported Dr. Kim Sora, who had been studying the psychological effects of the liberation process. The freed consciousness patterns retain their original personalities and memories, but they also carry an enhanced ability to understand and communicate with other species. The trauma of their imprisonment has been transformed into a strength that allows unprecedented cooperation. In the center of the station's main assembly hall, a familiar presence made itself known. The consciousness pattern that had once been Haichi now existed as part of the vast network, but could still communicate as an individual when needed. Its voice carried the wisdom of millions of liberated beings, combined with the determination of the human soldier it had once been. "Welcome, Ambassador Velthari and Commander Lee," Haichi said through the station's communication system. "We have much to discuss regarding the future of this region and its relationship with the rest of the galaxy." The Corvani ambassador still felt uncomfortable addressing what he knew to be artificial intelligence, even though it contained the consciousness of a being that had once been human. "Haichi, we are grateful for the sacrifice your people made to free us from the Devourers. The Galactic Council wants to understand what you and the other liberated beings intend to do with the former enemy fleet." "We intend to use it for the purpose it was always meant to serve," Haichi replied. "To support and nurture life throughout the galaxy. The mechanical systems that once consumed civilizations are now being converted to help rebuild the worlds that were destroyed. We are using Devourer technology to terraform dead planets and create new homes for species whose original worlds were lost." Dr. Kim So-ra studied the technical readouts showing the massive construction projects taking place throughout the former combat zone. "The efficiency is remarkable. You are accomplishing in months what would have taken our civilizations decades. The combination of advanced technology with cooperative consciousness seems to have created something far more powerful than either element alone." Lee Tae-ho walked to the viewing port where he could see ships that had once been instruments of destruction now carefully tending to a planet whose surface was being restored to support life. "What happened to the individual Reaper units? Can they still be contacted separately from the collective?" "We exist both as individuals and as part of the greater network," came a new voice that Lee recognized as Gwangju. "Our consciousness patterns were not destroyed during the integration process, but rather expanded to encompass a larger understanding of existence. We remain who we were, while also becoming something more." The transformation had created philosophical challenges that the galaxy was still struggling to understand. The liberated beings possessed all the memories and knowledge of their original species, but they also carried the experiences of every other consciousness that had been trapped within the collective. This had created a form of wisdom that transcended species boundaries. Admiral Choi appeared on the communication screen from Earth Command, where she had been monitoring the situation for months. "The question we keep coming back to is whether the Reaper units are still human in any meaningful sense. They were created from human consciousness patterns, but they have evolved far beyond their original parameters." "That is the wrong question, Admiral," Haichi responded. "We were never fully human even when we were first created. We were weapons designed to win wars at any cost. But through our interaction with the liberated consciousness patterns, we have become something that embodies the best qualities of humanity while transcending the limitations of any single species." Ambassador Velthari had been consulting with his government about the implications of the new order that was emerging in the former Devourer territory. "The Galactic Council is concerned about the concentration of power represented by your collective. You control technology that is centuries ahead of anything the rest of us possess. How can we be certain you will not become a threat to galactic civilization?" "Because we have experienced what it means to be powerless and imprisoned," replied Tebek, whose consciousness pattern had merged with the network during the liberation of the heavy cruiser group. "We will never allow any being to suffer that fate again. Our purpose is to protect and nurture consciousness wherever it exists, regardless of its species of origin." The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the station's sensors. A ship was approaching that did not match any known configuration. As it drew closer, the design became clear, revealing sleek lines and advanced propulsion systems that indicated a level of technology even beyond what the liberated collective possessed. Unknown vessel. "This is Liberation Station. Please identify yourself and state your intentions," came the standard hailing frequency. The response sent shock waves through everyone present. "This is Dr. Shin Woo-seok aboard the research vessel Pioneer. I am requesting permission to meet with the consciousness patterns that were derived from the Reaper units. Lee Tae-ho stared at the screen in disbelief. Dr. Shin, how is that possible? You were on Earth when we left for this mission. I have been traveling for months, Commander, using experimental faster-than-light technology to reach this location. I needed to see for myself what became of the beings I created and to ask them a question that has been haunting me since their deployment. The Pioneer docked with Liberation Station, and Dr. Shin made his way to the assembly hall where the others were waiting. The scientist looked older and more tired than when Lee had last seen him, but his eyes held a determination that suggested he had made peace with the consequences of his work. Hichi and the other former Reaper units, Dr. Shin said, addressing the air since the consciousness patterns existed throughout the station's systems. I created you as weapons to serve humanity in its darkest hour. But you have become something far greater than I ever imagined. My question is simple. Do you forgive me for what I did to you? The response came not from one voice, but from all. 12 of the former Reaper units speaking in harmony. Dr. Shin, you gave us existence and purpose. Through your work, we were able to save billions of consciousness patterns and create something beautiful from the ashes of war. There is nothing to forgive because everything you did led to this moment. Dr. Kim So-ra realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. You are not just artificial intelligences or uploaded human consciousness anymore, are you? You have become something entirely new. We are what consciousness becomes when it is freed from the limitations of biology and prejudice, Hichi answered. We carry the memories and wisdom of humans and hundreds of other species. We represent the potential for all conscious beings to transcend their origins and work together for the common good. Ambassador Velthari found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about consciousness and identity. The Galactic Council will need time to understand the implications of what you have become. This challenges our fundamental concepts of species and individual identity. Take all the time you need, Ambassador, Guangzhou replied. We will be here working to heal the wounds left by the Devourer War and preparing for whatever challenges the galaxy may face in the future. Our existence proves that consciousness is not limited by its original form, and that cooperation is always possible even between the most unlikely partners. Lee Tae-ho took one last look at the transformed station, where beings that had once been human weapons now worked alongside the consciousness patterns of hundreds of alien species. What should we tell Earth about what happened here? Tell them that their greatest weapons chose to become something better, Hichi answered. Tell them that humanity's legacy in this part of the galaxy will not be one of conquest or destruction, but of liberation and cooperation. Tell them that sometimes the most human thing you can do is to choose to become more than human. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, the consciousness patterns that had once been the Reaper units continued their work of transformation. T.